Welcome to the Scaringi Law Lunch Break. This is your time of the day to learn a little bit about the law while you enjoy your lunch. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi has made herself clear. In a recent interview, she stated emphatically that Democrats will give the president nothing for the wall. So perhaps the president should take the Democratic leader at her word and consider other options. The president himself has floated the idea that he could declare a national emergency and use the Department of Defense and monies already appropriated to it to build the wall. But does the president have the authority to do that? Those on the left say no. The left-leaning New York Times recently published an opinion piece by Bruce Ackerman, a Yale law professor, entitled "No, Trump cannot declare an emergency to build his wall. If he did and used soldiers to build it, they would all be committing a federal crime." Excuse me. But is he right? Ackerman claims our long-standing legal tradition is that the chief executive is prohibited from using the military to enforce domestic law. That's true. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 makes it a crime to do so, unless the president is authorized by the Constitution or Congress. But this argument is a red herring. Building a wall is not enforcing domestic law. If a U.S. soldier digs a hole and places a steel post on our southern border, he's not enforcing domestic law, he's building a wall. The remainder of Ackerman's argument stems from the first fishy premise. He explains that although Congress granted the Coast Guard an exception to Posse Comitatus, allowing it to enforce domestic law within U.S. waters, there was no similar provision granting the other military services a comparable power to search, seize, and arrest along the Mexican border, Ackerman says. But the president is not talking about having the U.S. military search, seize, and arrest on the border. Ackerman also explains that although Congress made another exception to allow the U.S. military to detain domestically suspected members of al-Qaeda or the Taliban, it's an unconscionable stretch to use this proviso to support using the military for operations against the desperate refugees from Central America seeking asylum in our country, says Ackerman. Yet the president is not talking about using the military to attack Central Americans on our southern border. He's talking about using it to build a wall there. Lastly, Ackerman explains the U.S. Supreme Court invalidated President Truman's attempt in 1952 to use his powers as commander-in-chief to nationalize steel mills in the face of labor strikes. Yet, building a wall is not nationalizing a steel mill or intervening in a labor dispute. Yes, the government may have to take some private property, but it has always had the authority to do so under eminent domain. Contrary to Ackerman's claims, the law supports the president's position. Under Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces and has the power to direct the military at all times. Throughout our history, presidents have ordered our military to our southern border without congressional approval for various reasons, including to secure the border, protect Americans conducting trade, and to punish Mexican banditos, that is, bad hombres. And some presidents, including the hero to liberals Woodrow Wilson, even invaded Mexico without congressional authority. Wilson did it to restore American dignity. And our military has built several fortifications along the Rio Grande over the years. In 1976, Congress passed the National Emergency Act, authorizing the president to declare a national emergency and then undertake military construction projects and use funds appropriated but not yet obligated for military construction and family housing to pay for it. The president recently received over $10 billion in appropriations for military construction in fiscal year 2019. He can use any amounts of those funds and any from previous years that are still unobligated to fund construction of the border wall. And we are in a state of emergency. We recently watched as hundreds of foreigners tried to storm our border. From Kate Steinle to Molly Tibbetts to Ranil Singh, the headlines are full of horror stories of illegal aliens crossing the border and killing Americans. Each year, we're apprehending 500,000 to 1 million people illegally crossing our largely open southern border. How many are we missing? Furthermore, there is an existing state of emergency giving the Department of Defense emergency military construction authority to combat terrorism. And there are many documented cases of terrorists crossing our southern border. If the president declares a national emergency and orders the construction of the wall, The Defense Department should be ready. It was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the National Guard who performed a significant amount of the construction of part of the border fence in 2007. Both agencies are under the authority of the Department of Defense. The Corps has already been assessing the various prototypes for the wall submitted by the Trump administration. This matter is queued up and ready for Trump to make the declaration, find the money already appropriated, and build the wall. Well, that's about all the time we have today for the Scaringi Law Lunch Break. I hope you learned a little bit about the law. Thanks for listening and enjoy your lunch.